Well, welcome to the Business Spotlight series. My name is Donna Kapmeyer, and I'm the CEO and firm owner of ActionCOACH in Coastal Bend and Capital Game Planning Consulting here in South Texas, and I will be your host for today. I am very excited to have our special guest, Yair Griver, on our show. Yair is the CEO of Code Staffing. Today, we're going to speak to him about his business, his journey to get to where he's at today, the challenges and successes of owning and operating not only one business, but several businesses. If this is your first time on our channel, please be sure to like and subscribe so you can get notifications when we publish new content. Well, Yair, welcome to the show, and it's great to have you on.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Let's start off by having you take a little moment to share some things about yourself and how your journey began.
Sure. A lot of people know me as Yag or Alan or Yair. Yag are my initials. And when I started in the business back in the mid 80s, I would sign all of my CompuServe at the time, pre-internet messages with Yag, leading some people to think I was a tall Danish dude, which was kind of funny. But yeah, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Code Staffing is actually my fourth startup. My
Wow.
first, between my first and second, I had 10 years working at Microsoft, which was kind of an MBA in action all by itself. And now I'm having a great time, building this company.
That is fantastic. What a story. A big company, Microsoft. That's fantastic. So let's talk about the challenges and mistakes. What were some of the biggest mistakes you made along the way of getting to where you're at today? And what did you learn from them?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of them. With my first company, was called Flash Creative Management. It was in beautiful Hackensack, New Jersey. And we ran it for about 16 years, 15, 16 years. And one thing I learned there was the importance of cash flow in a business. So we were building the company. It was growing. It was going great. We had a few $1 million in receivables. And one day we woke up and we couldn't meet payroll without taking loans out of our own 401ks for myself and my partner, David. Um, we found an advisor, a guy named Carl Epstein, who has since passed away, who was amazing. He was kind of our Yoda. He wouldn't answer any of our questions, but he would ask questions and make us figure things out for ourselves. And getting through, well, there were a couple of things that mitigated that issue. First of all, we had an incredibly close company. I mean, in 15 years, we really only had about three people leave the company. And when this happened, we went to our entire company in one of our all hands meetings every week, and we said, mea culpa, we screwed up. And here's the financial problems. Here's where we are. And a number of our people came to us and said, I can hold off on taking a paycheck for a month or 2 months. That's how
Wow.
invested they were in the company, which was wonderful. But we rapidly learned how to build spreadsheets to track expected cash flow, on a week by week, if not day to day basis to make sure it never happened again. And even when my current business partners and I were looking at code staffing, one of the first things I did in our pro forma was put a cash flow statement so that we would actually be able to see, you know, when and where we might have issues. So yeah, that was probably my single biggest business lesson. In terms of hiring people, well, I'm in kind of a niche. We hire developers in IT. One of the things I've learned is that you can have great developers, but the absolute cream of the crop are the ones that try to understand the business as well as the technology side. And we even, talk about how, once you hit a certain point, the way you continue to grow is by the influence you have across the business, not just, in mentoring other people on the team. So I guess those are kind of my top two.
Love that. So let's go into that a little bit more. And
Sure.
let's talk about what differentiates you. Do you think that those things, relative on the employment side, differentiate you from others in your industry?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of things that differentiate us. You know, as I mentioned before, I've done a number of different startups, right? So the
Hmm.
first one was a classic business and technology consulting company, and then Microsoft, of course. And then the next one was a suite of software for the casino industry built on a data analytics platform. And then the next one was a fintech, financial technology company, working to make legal services, lawyers affordable for the middle class. And now I'm back to this company called the Code Group, which has been around for 31 years, but I run the staffing part of it, where we provide dev and IT staffing to clients of ours. Okay.
Hmm.
And so obviously, a lot of different things. And every time I go into, picking a new area to go, there are a couple of things that I'm looking for. One of them is, can I learn from that industry, right? So, working with Native American tribes on the casino stuff, really cool, learned a lot, right? Working with the American Bar Association in different states, really cool, learned a lot. Um, with code staffing and with the others, you're always looking for your unique proposition, right? What are you going
Right.
to do? And it's not just, what's your unique selling proposition for clients? What are you doing to make a client's life better? But what are you doing to make your own people's lives better and everyone who's involved? So, for instance, with the fintech for the legal startup, it was what are we doing to make life better for the attorneys, life better for the people who are looking for attorneys, and life better for us and our employees, right? So we had a triangle we were looking for. In staffing, it's similar. What are we doing to make life better for our people, our
Hmm.
clients, and us as a company? And so we decided to approach staffing from an angle that pretty much no one has taken so far. So if you look at staffing companies, most of them hire people as 1099s. And what
Hmm.
that allows them to do is basically say, okay, I'm paying you X an hour, call it 65 an hour, and I will bill our clients, and a lot of them are making 50, 60% on top. So I'll bill you at 100 an hour. If you don't work, I don't bill, but I don't care because I don't pay you either.
Hmm.
The people who are the 1099 employees have to go ahead and pay for their own health care. So if they've got a family, that's what, 20, 25,000 a year before
Hmm.
deductible, etc. Um, and they don't get vacation time unless they take it without pay.
Hmm.
And they don't get Social Security covered, all of those things. You have to do it yourself. What we said was, you know, the difference between 50 to 60% profit, that leaves a lot of margin for us to change things. So what we do is we hire our people as W-2. We offer best of the breed, Microsoft or Google style benefits. So for instance,
Okay.
we pay 100% of our people's health care, including for their families. So they pay nothing there. And our healthcare plan has zero deductible and zero copay. So they literally pay nothing for healthcare. They can go in, have a problem, be hospitalized, have surgery, come out. They haven't had to pay a penny, which is unbelievable here. We have a 401k with a 4% match. We do flexible time off with a minimum expected of 3 weeks. We treat our people as human beings, which is kind of a weird thing to say as your unique selling proposition, but it's really true. And then for our clients, because our people are salaried and are not hourly, it means for all of those who are exempt from overtime, we can bill at a fixed price for our clients. So we're open with our clients. We say, look, this person is making, let's keep the numbers easy, 100,000 a year
Mhm.
with 30,000 a year in benefits. That's 130. We take a 20% profit on top of that. So that's 26,000. So we will bill you 156,000 a year divided by 26. Here's what you get. So for our clients, they now have a budget that they can meet basically to the penny for this instead of worrying, oh, we're shipping something this week, so people are working an extra 10 hours, so we have to pay more, or we're paying less this week because someone's taking vacation. We include that all in the cost. Our clients understand that our people deserve and get vacation. They understand that if they work extra, they won't be billed more. And they also understand that unlike a typical 20 to 25% turnover that they get with most of their staffing companies, our turnover the last 2 years has basically been zero. So they save about $30,000 per year per person in finding and training costs. We have people who understand their business, going back to what I said earlier, as well as the technology. And so it's really a win-win for everybody. And we don't charge our clients, we charge them about the same as other companies because we take the 30% plus the 20%. That's the
Mhm.
50% markup. So it works out well for everyone. And that's why we found ourselves growing so fast.
Well, what you're saying is like almost unheard of, right?
Yes.
What a culture you created, right? You've got dedicated folks who don't want to leave, and then you've created transparency and clarity for your client base. I mean, that's tremendous.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. And we try to provide the same clarity to our people as well. So they understand what they're being billed out at.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're not as good at this as I'd like to be yet, but one commitment I've made is that we'll share our books with our people. And so they can, call me and ask for a one-on-one, and I'll do it now. We haven't we focus on the most important things from an internal IT perspective. So we haven't yet been able to set things up so that the books are automatically available on our internal systems for everyone. So they have to go
Mm-hmm.
through me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm happy to share it. And we're very clear with people, where when we hit profitability and when profits coming, because everyone knows we want to include profit sharing as one of our benefits. We just have to get to the point where we have enough to dole out, and we're just about there. I mean, we were at 0 people 2 years ago. January 1st we hired our first person on January 2nd, and we're at nearly 110 people now. So that's pretty
My
good for two
goodness.
years. And our break even point was about 90 people. So we're
Fantastic.
getting there.
Well,
Yeah.
with this tremendous growth, where do you see yourself and what are your aspirations for the business in the next 5 years?
Uh, so financially, it's pretty straightforward. Right now we have a an annual billing rate of around 15-16 million dollars, which again,
Okay.
pretty good for 2 years. One of the
Yeah.
fastest in the companies I've done. I expect within the next few years we'll be in the 100 million plus range. Um, I also think, just looking at putting my pure business hat on, is that at some point around there, we either start getting people wanting to acquire us. So then there's a big question of, is there a cultural fit? Do they want to do things the way we do things, etc.? Or potentially grow through acquisition, in which case there is a whole host of other issues, right? Finding
Mm-hmm.
people to provide the funding, et cetera, to cover some of that. So I think, all of those things will be happening. Um, from a pure strategic perspective, so what I'm focusing on in this 6 month period is standardizing our sales process
Okay.
and working with our salespeople to make sure we've got that tuned and nailed, and all of our people understand it and can act as kind of introductory salespeople for
Hmm.
within our clients. Um, Next 6 months is going to be devoted to corporate culture. So, I've I've emphasized culture in every company I've been part of. There are a few unique issues with running a staffing company that can be remote, that you don't necessarily have with a consulting company where people are remote. So let me talk about that real quick. So
Okay.
code, let me take a step back. So the code group has four areas: code training, where we oddly enough provide training in technology, etc. We have Code Magazine, which is hitting its 25th anniversary next month.
Wow.
And that is a developer oriented magazine, one of the last ones in print, a couple of 100,000 subscribers between the print and the online version. Um, and then we have Code Consulting, which provides bespoke consulting. So, if you have a company that's looking to have an app or an internal system created and you don't have the people internally, we can take over the whole project, do it, ship it to you, help train someone new if you want to run it yourself afterwards. We can provide staffing to take care of it. So that's consulting. And then there's staffing, where we provide people that sit in our clients' offices and work as part of their team.
Okay.
Now, for the first three, we have a really strong culture, because when you're working on a consulting project of, say, a team of six, all six of them are from code. So you're working together with other code people, and it's really clear to you that you're part of code. When you get into staffing, the interesting thing is you are working, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week at a client site, call it corporate
Hmm.
XYZ.
Hmm.
As a single person in a group of maybe eight, or maybe two people out of eight, you end up taking on the culture of the client, not as much of
Hmm.
code. So the
Hmm.
question is, should we be, and how do we make sure that you feel a part of code, right? The benefits are a part of it. The fact that everybody has my cell phone number if they want to reach me, that's a part of it. But, you know, eh, we need the fact that we work with them on their career. We help them find speaking engagements or writing engagements, or paying for their training, etc. That's part of it. But there's kind of this ineffable thing that defines a culture, and it comes from the top down and the bottom up. So what do we do, and how do we do it without taking people away from our clients, because we already have their agreement on the 3 week minimum of PTO. We can't, when we have a corporate retreat, for instance, we have to do it on the weekends right now, right? In the past, we could do it during the week because they were all our people working on our
Hmm.
projects. So trying to kind of figure out how to tie that all together, that's going to be the project for the second half of the year.
Gotcha. That does come, the statement culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you're talking about integration, right? Two cultures, the culture at the client site and then the culture internally. So I can see where it might have its own set of
Right.
challenges.
And then you add to it the fact that we might have, 15 or 20 staffing clients. So it's 15 of them plus us, right?
do, do the
So,
math.
so yeah, it's a really interesting, I went to college for cultural anthropology and English literature. So for me, this is a really cool business and person problem. So,
Yeah.
but I haven't figured it out yet. But when I do, I can promise you I'll be writing a bunch of white papers. So,
Fantastic. Fantastic. All right, let's talk about, people who maybe have been of influence in your life. When you think about success, Who is the first person you think of and why?
So I I think there are two of them. Um, so the first one is my grandfather. So my grandfather um, was a victim of the concentration camps in World War II.
Ooh.
He was in Auschwitz and then on the death march. And he was pulled out of a pile of bodies by an American soldier who was photographing the atrocities and noticed my grandfather's eyes blink. Um, he pulled him off and got him to an American field hospital and saved his life. My grandfather then helped the American soldiers to run the largest displaced persons camp in the American sector of Germany after the war. So he had, all of those people who had been through just horrors, and he trained
Hmm.
them so they could get visas all around the world, wherever they could be accepted outside of Europe. And he also went ahead and reburied both the murdered Russian soldiers and the murdered Jews properly in their own areas, bringing in a Russian Orthodox priest to bury the Russians properly. And it always amazed me that, months after going through this, he had the moral fortitude to do that. And then when I would grow up, I would go visit him, and there were always these older people. Well, I was, 12, so everyone was old to me back then. They would come visit him for advice on accountants, lawyers. He would take them to introduce them to attorneys, to banks, etc. And it was only after he passed away that I realized that these were the people from the DP camp who lived near him, who their entire lives used him as a mentor and assistant to keep their lives on track. And he never said no to any of them. He always helped them all along. And that had just a profound influence on me, and how I always want my businesses to do something for good, and why I always, anyone who asks me for a half an hour or an hour to look over their resume or mentor them or whatever, it's always a yes, right? It may not be this week, but it'll happen. So that's one of them. The other one is my first business partner, David Blumenthal, who is actually has remained a best friend and an advisor all these years. Um, when we were starting the company, I was the tech guy. So
Okay.
I was, 26, 27 years old, smart thinker, new technology. So we would sit in meetings, and I would kind of solve the problems in my head while people were still talking about it. And I would always want to jump in and show how smart I am, how I had the solution, all of that. And David would sit next to me and just tap my knee with his hand whenever he knew I was going to do that, to teach me to stay quiet. He was the sales guy, right? And, to let people finish, let them get out their pain points, and then it would be my turn to repeat them and show how they can be fixed. And even today, when I'm sitting in meetings with clients, I can feel his taps on my knees, right? And he taught me so much about how to treat people. He and I still to this day finish each other's sentences. We haven't worked together day to day since we sold our company in 2000, but we're still regularly in touch. We saw each other last week. And so he's definitely one of my main influences, just seeing how he raised his family, how he worked with our people. Just an amazing guy, and the best salesperson I've ever met. So
Well, two amazing stories and two amazing influences. Man, that is fantastic. So let's talk about the future, looking even further out. What excites you about the future of the business that you're in today?
So what really excites me is the potential to change the industry. You know, the staffing industry got started with things like the Kelly girls back in the 50s, right? And too much of the industry, I think, is still mired in that kind of world, right?
Mm-hmm.
A job opening happens, you look in your list of resumes, you find someone, are they available? You slot them in, and then you never talk to that person again. Once a year, you send them a 1099, right? That, to me, that's just fundamentally broken. What
True.
I love about code is, you know, we approach things as one code, as you can call it talent as a service, I guess. We have all
Mm-hmm.
this talent, right? Magazine writers, trainers, consultants who can work from a high strategic business scale all the way down to people who can, write some of the best code you've ever seen. And we use that to solve our customers' problems, right? We don't come in and say, everything's a nail. We say, okay, what's the best combination of things? And we measure ourselves on how we grow with our clients, right? So I'm always excited about that kind of stuff. I'm excited about giving our people as we grow more and more opportunities, whether it's, growing someone who's a few years out of college to the point where she could take my place as CEO, to, someone who is really happy just being a developer and works for a client, say in the energy industry, and then says, I want to work in compilers or something else. And we have the client base that we could then plan to move them so that we can
Gotcha.
continuously grow their careers. And, you know, I think it would be a marker of success if we actually end up with more competition. Um, I'll tell you a story with large clients of ours. Once we hit a certain number of staffing people there, around 8 or so, so that we then put in a full-time account manager to work with our clients to help them put together job descriptions, etc., to do one-on-ones with our people and help grow their careers. What happens, and it's a great thing for us, but it's an indictment of the industry in general, is that we will literally have a line out the door of our account manager of other staffing companies' people asking what they have to do to move to us,
Wow.
right? So, I mean, it's great because I know that if I land a Fortune 200 companies and we get 8 people in there, next thing you know, we're 80 people in there because
Yeah.
of that, right? But honestly, I wish that wasn't the case. So, I'm hopeful that, as we start talking about what talent usage is going to become in this century with the advent of AI and quantum computing and all of that, I think the model is changing. I think we're kind of at the cutting edge of it. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think you'll start seeing more, white papers and articles and podcasts like this with both me and my partners, talking about how we think things need to change.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, that's terrific. Now let's go back and hindsight's always 2020. If you could do this all over again, what would you do differently, or would you do anything differently?
Um, what would I do different? So I'd probably be focusing on sales a little earlier. Uh, as I mentioned before, I think in 6-month strategic blocks, right?
Good.
So
Hmm.
um I first we started the company 5 months before we hired our first person, and we focused on optimizing HR, onboarding, things of that sort, so that because we had the feeling we were going to grow pretty quickly, right? And working our way through that, growing to the size where we could offer these medical benefits, right? You can't
Mm-hmm.
do that when you're two or three people. You got to wait
Right.
till you're like 50 or 20 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm glad, I'm I'm satisfied with the order in which we did things, but I'd always like to do them faster. So I think especially sales, we've really started focusing on in November of last year. Um, if I could have started August of last year doing some of the things we're doing now, that would have been great. There were different reasons why we couldn't, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, I always like to. I've never done anything where I haven't thought afterwards I could have done it quicker.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, what is the best way for our audience members to learn more about you and your business?
You can go to codestaffing.com. So that's an easy way to do it.
Okay.
You can email me at YAG at codestaffing.com. I'm always happy to talk through things. Those are probably the two best ways to go. On the codestaffing.com site, there's even a place where you can set up a web call with me anytime. So it's got my calendar on there. So you just pick the open times and, we'll have a good time.
Sounds good. Well, Yair, thank you for sharing your story. This has been
Thank you.
fantastic. And I hope that the audience finds this information and your story very valuable. I'm sure they will. This is the Business Spotlight series with Donna Kapmeyer from Action Coach of Coastal Bend and with Yair Griver with Code Staffing. Please be sure to like and subscribe so you can continue to see our great content. Thank you for being on the show today, and bye for
Thank you for
now.
having me.
Thank
Take care.
you.